everybody. I'm David Asman. Thanks for joining us. Kicking off tonight, our op-ed. Egypt is a mess, but we don't really need Egypt. In fact, America doesn't need the whole Mideast. Yes, we have interests there. We want to stand by Israel, which is why we've been paying off Mubarak over the years, but we're better than that. Our security should not hang on dictators, and our economic security shouldn't hang on oil sheiks who provide back-channel support to al-Qaeda. We really don't need them. We have everything we need right here. We're not just talking about windmills and ethanol and other pipe dreams that cost taxpayers a lot more to produce than we get out of them. We're talking about real carbon fuels, the ones that make real money: oil, coal, and gas. Now, Fadel Gate, one of the smartest oil guys in the world, was here on Friday telling us that there's enough carbon fuel right here in this country to make us 100% energy independent in just 10 years. The problem is that President Obama and his friends hate carbon fuels, and they want to regulate them out of existence. They're using the EPA to close down coal operations, to stop fracking projects to get natural gas, and to stop oil drilling projects, even, in some cases, defying court orders to do that. Now, many of the projects they are now stopping had already been green-lighted by previous regulators, and companies like Arch Coal in West Virginia had invested tens of millions of dollars in these projects, only to have the rug suddenly pulled out from under them. This scares the hell out of businesses, and it kills jobs. And the overall policy of attacking carbon fuel production in America assures only two things. One, that America will become even more dependent on foreign producers of carbon fuel as our energy producers get screwed. And two, that the world will be a dirtier place. And that's because we produce and burn carbon fuels much cleaner than anybody else. Yes, carbon energy is dirty. We get that. But it can be made cleaner. And no country in the world has done more to make carbon fuels cleaner than we have. So if you want a cleaner world, then drill more, mine more, frack more, right here. And if you believe that we can and we should be independent from the polluting dictators who now control a lot of our energy, then you should be fighting against the EPA's efforts to shut down carbon energy production in this country. Fighting for independence is in our blood, and the means for energy independence is in our land. Now, Texas was one of the states that really pioneered the road to energy independence with its proud traditions as an oil producer, and now that state is fighting a very tough battle with the EPA over the state's efforts to control its air quality around oil refineries. The Attorney General of Texas has been leading that fight, and he joins us now from Washington, D.C. We welcome Greg Abbott, Texas Attorney General. Greg, great to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you again.
So remind our viewers what the EPA is trying to do down in Texas.
Well, we're fighting the EPA on three fronts. One is the legal front. Texas has filed 6 lawsuits against the EPA for 6 rules issued by the EPA that, among other things, attempt to regulate greenhouse gases, that violate the rules established by the Clean Air Act, that also violate the rules by the Administrative Procedure Act. But also we're fighting them on the regulatory front. But most importantly, I'm here in Washington, D.C. because we're fighting the EPA on the legislative front. Congress is taking up a law that may be the most important law Congress takes up this entire year. Congress is trying to remove from the EPA their ability to regulate greenhouse gases. Right. People need to understand this one piece of legislation could be worth billions upon billions, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars to our fellow Americans. And so I was here to testify today about why Congress should remove this authority from the EPA, among other things. If this bill succeeds, it will mean that Texas will be able to dismiss all these lawsuits that we filed against the EPA for violating the law.
By the way, Greg, we should tell our viewers that originally what the EPA did is they changed the rules. They changed the rules of the games that all the states have been playing for years and years. And whenever they do that, states are usually given 3 years to accommodate their own system with the new regs that come from the EPA. In this case, they didn't do that. They said, okay, we got new rules. You got to follow them starting now. Originally, there were 13 states that they targeted. You were one of them. The other 12, correct me if I'm wrong, but they backed out. You're the only one who stood to your guns on this, right?
Well, in one matter, we are the only state that's battling the EPA. In another matter, we have about 12 states who've joined with us and challenged the EPA issuing new rules regulating greenhouse gases. This is so incredibly important because we believe not only does the EPA not have authority to regulate greenhouse gases, but if they succeed in this effort, it's going to impact jobs, it's going to impact the economy, it's going to crush the ability of farms, schools, churches, hospitals from being able to operate like they have traditionally operated. But you touched upon the cornerstone here, and that is this is just the EPA coming up with their own rules. And listen, David, we live in a nation that is operated by the rule of law. That is what separates the United States from other countries, and that is because we believe in the rule of law. And we're dealing with bureaucrats who shift and change the law in ways that make it difficult to operate a business here in this country. So Correct. We're just trying to enforce the rule of law and make the EPA comply with it. Well,
we are also a republic, we should remember, and that gives states enormous rights, and it was set up that way for a reason. We don't want the arbitrary rule by one branch of government, the executive branch, to take over, which seems to be what's happening. And to my larger point, Greg, that this is an administration that hates carbon fuels. I happen to love carbon fuels, by the way. I think they're the engine of growth in this country. Yes, they're dirty, but we have managed to clean them up quite a bit. States like Texas, West Virginia, a number of states in this country, and now with gas, even states like Louisiana, New York are producing new gas that can make us energy sufficient, which would be tremendous. But this administration hates carbon fuels. They want to kill the carbon fuel industry. Is that really what this is about, or at least partly?
Well, that's part of it. Two key points. One that you touched upon, and that is those who think that greenhouse gases should be regulated contend that greenhouse gases are the environmental issue of our time. If that is true, don't you think it should be elected officials put here by the voters across this country as opposed to unelected bureaucrats who are making the decision about supposedly the most important environmental issue of our time?
Well, and they're making decisions about a lot of things. In fact, the EPA administrator, Lisa Jackson, wants to control what businesses do and what businesses spend, how they spend money. In fact, she was talking today, I believe, or at least in the past couple of days, about all the cash that a lot of companies have in reserve, over $1 trillion, because they're scared to death of not being able to get bank loans and what's going to happen in the future. She has an idea where that money should go. Let's play that tape.
American companies have a record amount of cash holdings and liquid assets. The Wall Street Journal recently reported that number as $1.93 trillion.
So she actually wants to tell businesses how to spend their money. She doesn't only want to tell states what to do, she also wants to tell businesses how to spend their money. It's that attitude that bothers me.
Well, and the reason why those businesses are not spending that money here in the United States is because of the burdensome regulations issued by things like the EPA. And what's going to happen here is that if these greenhouse gas regulations come into effect, there's going to be so many businesses who will take their jobs to other countries that don't have these regulations. But, David, you need to understand this one key point that a lot of people don't understand, and that is that greenhouse gases don't stay around the area where they are emitted. You are just as likely to be exposed to the greenhouse gases that are emitted from China and India as you are from New York and Washington, D.C., because they travel globally. And so it's just folly for the EPA to think that they can pass these regulations. It's going to have either any impact on our air environment and air quality here in the United States, but most importantly, that it's not going to have an impact on our economy. Believe it or not, Lisa Jackson testified today that because of the greenhouse gas regulations, it will create jobs. And of course, she was taken to task by members of Congress for the folly of that statement, because this will be a job killer, an economy killer. It's going to force those companies, as you were suggesting, taking their money to other locations across the globe.
It already has. You look at operations like Arch Coal in West Virginia, which had invested millions and millions of dollars based on agreements it had made with regulators in the past, and suddenly, based on these new regs, the EPA stops them cold from developing this new coal source that they have. So it has already cost jobs, it has cost businesses, and it could cost a lot more if it wasn't for folks like you who are willing to stand up in front of the EPA. Thank you very much for coming in. Greg Abbott, Attorney General of the great state of Texas. Good to see you again, sir.
You too, David.
Natural gas drilling is creating shellionaires. Now, these are multimillionaires who unknowingly own land that have massive natural gas reserves below the land. One of those potential shaleonaires is C.B. Leatherwood. He is a career oil man who is now retired and joins us now by phone. C.B., can you hear us okay?
Yes, I do.
All right. Tell us exactly what the companies exploring for gas are paying you and how they're paying you.
Well, I don't have any production yet on my property. I did get a great upfront lease for the royalties and minerals, and we have some small lakes on our property that we're selling water for the fracks for the wells, and we're doing well with that.
All right, so they've given you a check for leasing on your property, for checking whether or not there are gas reserves. They're $434,000, and you were also helping them with water. Now, has the EPA knocked on your door yet and said, what are you guys doing? Have you filed all the forms that you have to form?
No, they haven't yet. And what we're doing, we're just selling the rain water. It's water that we capture, water that comes out of the sky. And right now we're getting some rainfall, but it's not enough to fill our lakes back up. So we're hoping for rain, but I haven't had any conflict from them yet.
Okay, all right. Have you been warned about that from the gas companies, or do you expect it might stop you cold from getting this windfall that you've received?
Well, they're working on a deal and trying to say that the fraction of the shale to produce this gas, this Haynesville shale, they do hydraulic fracks, in which they're saying it's been talked that the shale, the fracks come up and venture back all the way to the surface and going to affect the water table and the drinking waters. But that, I think there's no way.
All right. Well, CB, we wish you the best of luck. It is a great windfall that you've had, and there are a number of neighbors of yours. And by the way, this is a place, Louisiana, nobody knew that it had gas under there. There are places in New York State that have the same kind of windfalls, in Pennsylvania. This is something that is happening all over the country, the potential windfall of people, to not only individuals to get money, but for the country as a whole to get a whole new resource that we hadn't counted on before. CB, we wish you the very best. CB Leatherwood from Louisiana. Coming up on deck, new Republican plans tonight to starve Obamacare. Reaction from none other than Congressman Charlie Rangel, who is a passionate advocate for the embattled health care law. He's